Laura Blumenfeld. She is a Middle East analyst at Johns Hopkins School for Advanced International Studies and joins us now from Istanbul. Laura, it's good to have you with us again. I want to start by asking you, did this report explain why Israel's army was so unprepared for this infiltration of militants?
I mean, great question. I think it gave us the what happened on October 7th, but it didn't even begin to address the why. This community that was just investigated, there were more residents killed there than in any other community. It was 1/10 of the population, over 100 killed, 30 taken hostage, 11 of whom are still being held in Gaza in captivity. So there are many questions that were raised, but not enough answers given. And you can hear that from the Israelis themselves, which is why they're pushing even harder for a hostage deal.
Exactly. So speaking of Kibbutz Be'eri, we heard residents there in that report asking what will be different next time. Can they expect a response, a clear plan going forward?
Well, Israel's founding principle is security, right? It was supposed to be a safe haven. It became a slaughterhouse on October 7th. As Israel's military chief of staff acknowledged, he said parents were left. They created body bunkers, a mother and father on either side of a child as bullets penetrated all of them and they died together. I think the strongest feeling is abandonment. And for the Israelis to be reassured, the IDF has to begin to build trust, which is why I think they are wholly owning their responsibility for what happened, but they're also throwing a little bit of a jab at Benjamin Netanyahu, because as Defense Minister Gallant said, it is time for a state independent inquiry. We were all be held accountable, including Prime Minister Netanyahu. This is something that he's bobbed and weaved about. Netanyahu has avoided taking responsibility. He said, while we're at battle, while we're fighting in Gaza, this isn't a time.
That comment you mentioned from Yoav Gallant is actually what really stood out to me, because he said, investigate me, investigate the Prime Minister, as you just quoted. Do you believe he means it? And do you believe there will be consequences for the authorities as well as the military?
I think Israel has a reasonable record when it comes to these wars and failures, following the Yom Kippur War and following the Lebanon War decades later. They are fairly good at looking inward and trying to learn their lessons. When Netanyahu is coming to Washington in 10 days, and the Israelis who are dual citizens, American Israelis, the hostage families, are trying to meet with and confront Netanyahu in Washington. He's coming for his great moment to give a triumphant or at least some kind of, rallying cry speech to Congress. But the American families of the hostages who are still being held in Gaza are asking for a meeting with him. It's after 9 months. A lot of people talk about that as the gestation period for a baby. This is also the gestation period for accountability.
And with Prime Minister Netanyahu heading to the US and these families holding him to account, can this report finally look like an admission of failure and impact the fact that he has survived all this criticism internally as well?
It's just the beginning. It's interesting. It looks like a military acknowledgement of failure, but what it's actually doing is pointing the finger right back politically at Benjamin Netanyahu, because in the spring and summer of 2023, when Israel was engaged in a kind of very, very divisive civil discourse, those demonstrations over the idea of judicial reform, which Netanyahu was pushing so that he could evade responsibility on a domestic corruption charge. The military issued multiple warnings saying, we are divided, we will be exploited for that. Hamas is watching, our enemies are watching, whether it's Hezbollah to the north or Iran to the east. We are under a threat, and we should take that seriously. And Netanyahu supposedly didn't take that intelligence warning seriously. It was an intelligence failure. It was an operational failure. And as the spokesman said for the IDF, we failed.
Quite a bit to unpack there, and thank you for doing that so clearly for us. Laura Blumenfeld, Middle East analyst at the Johns Hopkins School for Advanced International Studies.
Thank you.